Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. My name is Ryan Burkett. I'm the Director of Communications at People4Bikes. We are excited to present to you today the evolution of the bike consumer. We have a lot of new data insights that we're excited to share with the industry, and we're going to walk you through a little bit of what those insights might look like moving forward throughout the rest of 2026 and leading into 2027. Today we have two knowledgeable presenters on the call. We have Liam Donoghue, our Senior Research Manager at People4Bikes, and Connor Sokol, our Retail Engagement Manager, based out on the East Coast. So both of them are going to be our subject matter experts today. I did want to do a quick housekeeping piece, which is our question and answer. At the end of today's presentation, both Liam and Connor are going to field your questions. So throughout the presentation, as they go through their slides, if they're coming up with ideas or questions that you want to ask, go ahead and use the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the presentation. I'll also be monitoring the chat, so if you have questions or troubles with Zoom during the meeting, feel free to drop them into the chat, and I can help you troubleshoot. But with no further ado, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Liam Donoghue.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Super excited to be here. It is a little bit different than what we had hoped. This was going to be, this is sort of an evolution, haha, of what we would have been presenting at Frostbike. So a little bit bummed to not be in person with you. It's a little bit different just talking into my camera than it would be. So like Ryan said, we welcome any and all questions. Please start dropping them in the Q&A at any time. We're excited to give a very substantial amount of time at the end of this for Q&A. So yeah, the bike consumer. Let's start with participation. The bike consumer is a person who's out there riding, and so I wanted to start with participation, looking at how ridership has changed over the years. So what are we looking at here? This is from People4Bikes biennial US participation study. Some of you who are the maybe as nerdy as I am have probably seen this or something very similar to it. Our most recent data is from 2024. We're going to run this survey again at the end of the year. We do it every 2 years. So later in the fall, we'll be doing this again. What's neat is that the methodology we've used hasn't changed much over the past decade. So we're able to do these comparisons going all the way back to 2016. So first, I want to draw your attention to what we are calling the occasional riders, that kind of dark blue. Less than people who ride less than once about every 2 weeks. So it's increasing as we go from 2016 on up in both size, the millions of Americans who are these casual riders, and the percentage of the whole pie that they represent. So there are new entrants to the sport here that we should be focusing on. Looking at that moderate level, stays fairly steady, though the proportion of the total population, that percentage number, certainly does decrease over time. And then last, draw your attention to the committed, that red, stays fairly steady, but in 2024, we see a drop as compared to what we're seeing in 2022 and back in 2020, kind of a drop from that pandemic high. We do often group moderate and committed riders together into one enthusiast category, which you'll see in the next few slides, but wanted to break it out here to really highlight that the number of folks riding is growing, but where it's growing, as you can see, is really at that casual level. And so while selling a bike to an already existing customer is typically easier, that growth that's happening down there at the casual level, these folks who are only riding once or twice, or 3 or 4 times per year, what does that casual rider actually look like? We know from our study that they tend to be younger. They tend to be they're more likely to be female. You can see here uh, a pretty significant difference in those enthusiasts versus those casual riders. Some of this is a bit of common sense, but it's neat to see that the data backs this up. Casual riders are also more likely to be parents, to have at least one kid, not quite as large as some of the other differences. Similarly, they're more likely to be Black. They are less likely to be white. So we do see more African Americans in that casual participant base. Lastly, we know that casual riders tend to be less affluent. There is a larger number of those folks making less than 20K, or they're less folks making the 60 to 100K in the casual bucket. They're more likely to be in that sub $20,000 income group. And one group that certainly sits firmly in that lower income tier are kids. So kind of on the positive side here, in addition to that casual base growing, for a long time we saw years and years of declines. If we start here in 2016 and come over into the kind of towards 2022 into the middle of the pandemic, 10 to 17-year-olds dropped below 50%. Those preschool, early elementary school age kids seemed on target there to also potentially drop below 50% until our most recent survey, where we saw a pretty massive jump. And so some of this we think is based on the direct to consumer sales data that we have. It's that allure of the e-bike, particularly throttle driven e-bikes that we know sell very well in the direct to consumer market, makes up about 70% of all direct to consumer bike dollars are e-bikes. And the vast, vast majority, 90+% of those e-bike dollars are throttle driven e-bikes. Another important thing to note is the changing demographics. So falling birth rates, especially among younger women, we know there's sort of been a delaying in having kids. Often women are waiting until their 30s. So that's actually caused a decrease in the number of children. So 2.8% fewer kids in that kind of 0 to 18 population from 2020 to 2025. And we expect over the entire decade, so once we get to 2030, it's going to look like about a 6% drop in overall population. So kind of regardless of the why, those kids are out there, they're riding bikes. We know that the vast majority of adult riders started off riding as children. And so knowing that the population is dropping, we certainly need to continue to see this increase. Looking, sorry, apologize, but it's quite warm here. I'm actually dressed up in my nicest short sleeve button up, as here in Central Virginia, it is very warm and air conditioner season. Hope that all of your springs are going well. So looking at our ride counter data, we actually see more good news. This comes from our partners at EcoCounter. They track a couple hundred ride counters across the country. It's based on the location of their weekly observations, where maybe rides are more bunched up in that kind of Monday to Friday commute time. That counter gets classified as transportation, and then other ones that are more on the weekends, less during that kind of typical commute time, those are tagged as recreation counters. So we're able to kind of break it out by region and by purpose of riding between transportation and rec. There's obviously a little bit of overlap in those, but overall across the country, on that first that on the farthest left here, we see a 1.6% increase in overall riding. Transportation riding is up 4%. Rec, though, is down nearly 2%. And certainly different regions have had varying results here. But with the exception of the Midwest, that single red bar that we see, overall riding in the region was up, in every region was up, which is great. And though much of this participation data, especially the news about kids, is quite heartening, I certainly don't have to tell you all that the industry as a whole is still going through some tough times. So switching gears to what's happening in the market overall, well, this is what's happening. You may have seen this nearly exact chart at some point too. This is the total measured market from Circana. It includes both IBDs and mass merchants. It is not inflation adjusted. So these dollars that sold in 2019, same, kind of the nominal dollars that also then sold in 2025. So note that we ended this last year nearly identical to where we ended in 2019. Obviously, a bunch of inflation occurred during those intervening years. So it's a bit of apples to oranges comparison, but we've dropped back down to that level. Granted, the pace of the contraction has slowed. So 10% in 2022, 13% in 2023, and then it started dropping 8%, just 6% last year. The hope is we will see the bottom. Unknown if that's going to be in 2026. If we included the direct to consumer sales, which this chart does not show, Obviously, the absolute numbers for the last couple of years for when we have DTC data would be a little bit higher, but the percent drop stays the same. And one point we want to hammer home here is the number of bikes that are selling is declining. A lot of you are already aware of this, maybe feel this and see this on a daily basis. Looking at these blue columns, we're seeing those bike sales drop, even as that line showing the overall participation climbs. So there's really never been a larger disconnect between sales and participation than there is today. Certainly in 2020 and in 2021, we saw that massive spike. But if you take those out of the equation, it's really a steady drop from 18 million bikes sold a decade ago to just 11.5 million sold last year. And oops, I apologize, but that 2020 there on the far end is actually, should say 2025. Um, and our current estimates from the quarterly S&P Global Risk and Opportunity Forecast that we put out every quarter, we just put one out earlier this month, suggests that based on some demand modeling forecasts out to 2029, 2030, that number might actually drop below 10 million by the time we get to 2030. And that's mostly driven by adult non-electric bikes continuing to decline. So some thoughts on kind of why is there this disconnect? What is this evolution of this consumer? Obviously, economic conditions, we're going to come back to that. Rising average selling prices could be pricing folks out. If it's not pricing folks out, there could be just the extension of replacement cycles. And then there's a whole host of other things, potentially diminishing returns on new bike technology. So many bikes from so many brands these days are so good that I think some folks, especially at the higher end, the enthusiast end, it's harder for them to justify, putting their limited disposable income toward either a replacement or that N+1 bike. For that enthusiast too, it's kind of easier than ever to be super well informed. The kind of information that is at the hands of consumers these days is obviously greater. We know this from everything that we all buy, greater than it's ever been, as we contain kind of the entirety of the internet and all known knowledge in our pockets. So as an industry, we're not selling as many bikes, but I wanted to take this next moment here to kind of talk about where are the bikes selling. So how does a consumer actually end up with a bike in their garage, in their apartment? So this is bike sales dollars by channel. Dark blue is your IBD. That light blue is ROM, rest of market, which is also known as mass merchant. DTC, direct to consumer, and then used. PeopleForBikes puts out that used data with our partners at Bicycle Market Research. That is looking at mostly peer-to-peer, so eBay, Mercari, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, but also includes a couple of B2C, a couple of business to consumer used sites. That direct to consumer data is coming from the PeopleForBikes direct to consumer sales, and that is also in conjunction with Bicycle Market Research. And then that ROM and IBD, those pieces both come from Circana. And so the good news here on kind of what's going on and how did things change from last year to this year is that IBD really saw a smaller drop than any other channel. You don't get it with this chart, so I apologize a little bit, but obviously the 2025 pie should be a little bit smaller than the 2024 pie, but you'll see that the actual proportions have changed a bit as well, in that IBD actually made up a larger proportion of bike sales dollars. So there is a lot of data suggesting that IBDs are more relevant than ever. Purely DTC brands have been branching back into brick and mortar retail. And despite kind of how large that DTC chunk has become in a relatively short period of time, it's still half the dollar volume of IBDs, only two-thirds, of what's selling at mass merchants. And we saw DTC decrease slightly higher, kind of in between what we saw ROM and IBD decrease at. So these consumers have more options than they ever have before as far as where to go to get their bike or where not to go if they're just buying from the comfort of their Zoom screen or cell phones. Um, they also have more options on what kind of bike they buy. And I should note that when we're talking about that red DTC slice, I'll kind of reiterate that we're talking mostly about e-bikes. 70% of those dollars are e-bikes. Vast majority of those are throttle driven. So coming back to e-bikes, if you haven't heard, last year, the year before, for several many years, e-bikes are hot, and I'm not just talking about the motor or the battery at the top of the hill that you just rode up. They're awesome. Consumers are catching on that they are awesome. This chart clearly shows that you can see that red line starting in 2020, mountain bikes made up 40% of all adult bikes. This is effectively just excluding kids' bikes and looking at the percent that each category makes up of all bikes sold. 40% of all dollars there in 2020 were mountain bikes. Electric only made up 14%. Several categories were well above electric down there at 2020. Fast forward to 2025, and suddenly, for the first time, electric overtook mountain and is now the kind of highest market share of category. Some of that is due to cannibalization, terrible sort of word for it, but where folks are buying an e-mountain bike instead of buying an analog mountain bike. But much of that is also just due to the mountain bike segment itself contracting at a faster rate than any other category. So that consumers are buying fewer mountain bikes compared to other bikes than they kind of have in recent past. And so while we're on the subject then of kind of those things falling like mountain bikes have, one thing that we have to hit on here is consumer sentiment because that has been falling. I mentioned kind of the economy, and I want to come back to that because it's super important to discuss, despite the fact that maybe a lot of it is wildly outside of your control or my control. So if what this chart here is doing is if we index these three variables, the consumer sentiment index, which is the survey that the University of Michigan puts out, effectively asking folks, it kind of combines a little bit of everything because it's asking consumers just sort of how do you feel about the state of buying things right now. Um, and then the red line is that Circana sell through. So that's kind of the joint IBD and uh, ROM dollars. And then the yellow is the consumer price index, which is kind of a stand-in for inflation. And so if we index all of those to 100 at the time of January 2020, what we see here is kind of how they all move relative to one another. Consumer sentiment pretty immediately dropped. We all know why. We lived through it. COVID happened, but certainly it hasn't increased. A couple of fits and starts there around 2024, but with tariffs, with mortgage rates, inflation, uh, I can't imagine a war in Iran necessarily helping that number here in the future go up. It's probably likely to stay where it is, if not go down to kind of continued record lows. Yet, there's plenty of data suggesting that folks are still spending money elsewhere, just maybe not as much on larger discretionary purchases. The CPI mentioned inflation. So if we look at this, one kind of easy way to think about this is like back in 2020, $100 got you $100 worth of whatever. If we fast forward to the end there as we're approaching 2026, you'd need $125 to have that same purchasing power effectively. That's kind of the power of inflation. And that's a pretty substantial, chunk in just 5, 6 years' time. Like I said, though, bikes are ultimately a discretionary purchase. Many consumers are choosing not to buy at this point. But the piece that we wanted to kind of focus on is that you can't control it, right? Sort of spheres of influence, spheres of control. You've got to focus on those pieces that you can control. And so what we wanted to then come to is kind of what are the key takeaways? What's going on right now in the market, uh, in insofar as the shift in consumers buying or not buying, perhaps, despite them still being out there riding, certainly purchasing helmets at a good clip, spending money, more money than ever, or than last year, certainly on shop services. So we know kind of labor and repair is up. What's going on though? The key takeaways here is that the number of casual riders is increasing. The number of enthusiast riders are stable, though we do see a little bit of a drop from kind of the most ultimate committed riders potentially riding a little bit less. And this is very similar to a lot of the data that we're seeing from other industries. The Outdoor Industry Association shows core outdoor participation is down as folks kind of dabble a little bit more, as they spread themselves thinner across more activities. The opportunity here, like I said, is you focus on what you can control, the economic conditions, that consumer sentiment, your customers' disposable income. If we could control those, I would please email me if you can. I need you to do a couple of favors. Those are all outside of your scope, right? So bike sales continue to decline. We know that. We suspect that they won't decline they'll at some point plateau and level off. We hope and expect that that's going to be kind of coming up here soon at the 10 to 11 million new bike unit amount. And so then the opportunities, it's ensuring that that ridership base is ready when these economic conditions improve. A lot of preaching to the choir here, but incentivizing, you should be incentivizing enthusiasts to mentor casual and new riders. How do we engage those new and casual riders more? Ask them, find out, like what are the barriers to you riding more? Is it an infrastructure piece? We know that for a lot of folks it is. Safe places to ride, safer places to ride means more riding. That's a lot of why we're here as People for Bikes, working hard to help add thousands of miles of protected bike lanes across the country. The other piece is kind of meeting those casual and new riders where they are. We're not going to turn all of those new entrants into the sport into enthusiasts as much as we'd love to, but that's okay, right? So how do we meet them? What can we still sell them? How do we get them on the rides? How do we make sure that if the opportunity comes for them economically, potentially, that they're able to then take advantage? Get involved. Again, for this audience, I think it's more stay involved than get involved, or ramp up the involvement to improve the riding in your neighborhood and your hometown. That's really kind of where we think the best efforts can be made right now. And so before we open it up to questions, we've got plenty of time. We wanted to quickly talk to you about something that a lot of you out there, I'm sure, have already heard about from Connor. We wanted to tell the rest of you about it. It's something we've been cooking up for almost 2 years now. We're super excited about it. We see it in a bunch of our industry partners, from retailers to distributors to brand suppliers who've helped us get this product to where it is. They all agree that it's a great way to help retailers and to help suppliers evolve along with this changing consumer, because kind of the focus there is on changing. It's not changed. We know that where we're at right now isn't where we're going to be in 5 or 10 years. We've always tried to bring this type of data to the industry, but the reason that we're excited to be able to get that much more granular about it and deeper than we ever could before. So what is this product? It's the People for Bikes data suite. It's SKU level point of sale data from 600 plus IBDs across the country. We will get up to 600 IBDs. Right now, we're at about 200. It's aggregated and anonymized. So I am never seeing individual retailers' data, but I am able to see that data in aggregate down to the SKU level. So, uh, and it's then for you, for a retailer, it's a dashboard serving up key metrics from your store or stores compared to the entire US, eventually compared to those regions once we get a big enough sample size. And so it allows you, as Connor's going to kind of walk you through in a minute, to just be able to make better business decisions, to have better knowledge about what's going on in your own shop and nearby, and in the industry as a whole. And so this was our mission and how we set out to focus on this, the bicycle industry data exchange, which is sort of the engine or the drivetrain that powers this product that we're going to be selling to suppliers, called the data suite. So we want it to be higher quality than it's ever been, at a better value to suppliers. It is very free for retailers, uh, more timely, more transparent. We want you to understand where the data are coming from and how we arrive at our methodology. If we project to the market, it's because of A, B, C, and D. Deeper industry insight and superior customer service. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But so like I said, we've got a couple hundred retailers on board already. We plan to get over 1,000 in the coming years. And in the future, kind of based on how large and how representative that dealer sample gets, we're going to be able to kind of say then what is happening down to these 4 census regions, or potentially even down to the 10 census divisions. Uh, and so, yeah, I'm super excited. We're going to walk you through a little bit. And on that kind of customer service note, going to turn the mic over. I've been talking for a long time, so I'm glad that Connor's going to be able to take it over from me. To Connor Sokol. He's handling all of our retail recruitment. So we brought him on 7-ish months ago. Uh, he's welcoming IBD partners into this bicycle industry data exchange. You guys are the ones powering this thing. And so Connor's going to briefly walk you through it, tell you kind of what's available to all participating retailers. And so Connor, without further ado, take it away.
Thank you very much, Liam. For those of you
Yeah.
who have not met me in the past, I'm Connor. I work as our retail engagement manager, working to build and maintain relationships with thousands of shops around the country in order to build the data suite into kind of the best product that we possibly can. We really want it to be the most representative data platform out there, to be the best tool for your shop. We're going to give you a quick little overview of some of the current functionality of the data suite. Remember that this is currently a beta product, so this is not what it will look like when it does go fully live, and it will continue to improve with more feedback and more users rolling in on it. Just a quick note for any suppliers in the audience today, this is the retailer dashboard. There is a completely separate supplier dashboard, and those of you who do subscribe will see a completely different product that will show brand market share and a lot of other different other metrics. If you are a retailer, once you've read and signed the terms of service and connect with your point of sale, then you'll have access to a personalized version of what we're looking at here today. So as you can see, Liam just switched over here. Right off the bat, we're going to jump into a quick little overview of our homepage here. So it's going to show everything from market-wide sales data and revenue in a selected period of time to continuous margin trackers. All these features are really designed around the idea of giving shops a better insight into their markets than they've ever had before. One of the really big features that we're super excited about is our SKU level sales data in the Product Explorer. This will allow dealers to be able to see true sales number for a specific SKU product in their region before they bring it in, avoiding potential dead stock, avoiding slow moving products, and just keeping your money flowing instead of sitting in dead products on your shelf. Since we've launched the data suite beta, we are already hearing back from participating dealers about how they've been able to make more improved business decisions and purchasing decisions, saving them both time and money. If you're a retailer, we want you to join this. Help us build the data suite into the best possible tool for the ever-evolving bike industry.
Thank you so much, Connor. And we now want to turn it over and have tons and tons of time to questions. So I know some of you have started dropping some in. Thank you for doing that. If it's a question about the data suite, go for it. If it's a question about any of the charts that we showed, please feel free to drop those in, and we are going to answer live if and where we can. Because yeah, that's what we're hoping to do. I want to start with this one just because it's top of mind. Uh, in the past, increases in oil and gas prices yielded increases in bike sales. Do you see the same thing occurring if oil and gas prices continue to increase? Yeah, so I mentioned the war in Iran. Obviously, it is very new and fresh, and it's going to be hard to kind of see what those changes are for a little while until they come. But yeah, if history is any indicator, right, like as gas prices go up, history tells us that bike sales go up. So it's kind of a potential silver lining to what is currently going on there. Um, yeah, we'll be watching it, and we would expect it to, right? There's always going to be some folks who are going to, at a certain threshold of gas, it's too much. So definitely, thank you for that question.
Connor, there was one question that came in regarding the what point of sale systems we can integrate with, and I think it's worth answering that live in case folks aren't reading the Q&A.
Yeah,
So if you wouldn't
absolutely.
mind.
So at this point in time, we have integration with almost every point of sale out there. It's a very simple process to integrate with your point of sale. Generally takes just a couple of clicks and just a couple of minutes. There are very few left on the market that we don't have integrations built for. And if you are running some super obscure thing that we haven't heard of yet, chances are we can find an integration pretty quickly for you.
And Connor, quick follow-up question on that.
Mhm.
Once a retailer decides to integrate with the data suite, how soon will they be able to access the dashboard that we just demoed?
Generally within 24 hours. We're pretty quick about getting a turnaround of building that personalized dashboard for each shop that onboards here. Generally within 24 to 48 hours, we're supplying that back to shops.
Great. Liam, there was a bunch of questions that rolled in regarding the e-bike category. A lot of interest there, obviously. One of the questions that came in was new bike unit sales. Do they include that the data you shared on new bike unit sales, does that include both electric and non-electric bikes?
Yes. So that, assuming that that question is about kind of the forecast and where we expect that number to keep going, yes, we that includes effectively that S&P global forecast breaks the demand model into three categories or four, kind of three bike categories plus service and parts, which service and parts is really just kind of predicated on the three bike categories themselves. So of those three bikes, it's adult non-electric, kids bikes, and electric bikes. And so we're able to then see kind of how does each of those contribute to those 11.5 million bikes that we expect will be sold this year in 2026 and on down 2027, 28, and 29. And if that doesn't
Question.
exactly answer your question, please ask it again, and I'll try to get to it.
Liam, I think a question that builds on that really well is what are we calling e-bikes? The question specifically says, do you count e-moto products like Surons, etc., as an e-bike?
Good, very good question. And so, no, it has to be an e-bike. Throttle driven can still be an e-bike, but as soon as you get into what we uh, term the e-moto, where it doesn't have any sort of pedals, we're still trying to track it to see if we can see what's going on in the D2C world, but that is not included in any of the data that we're showing that we showed today.
And this one might be a follow-up. I'm not sure if you have this data on the tips of your fingers, but the question is regarding the proliferation of e-bikes by dollars slide. And the question is, with e-bike costs being more, um, obviously that inflates that graph. So the question is, do we have a breakdown of that chart in quantity and not dollars?
We do. I don't have it right now to share with you, but certainly we do. And feel free to hit me up at liam@peopleforbikes.org. We'll be at the Bicycle Leadership Conference next week, so I may not get to it right away, but would love to answer that because yes, as I mentioned, the average selling prices are increasing really across the board. E-bikes is kind of the one interesting category where we were seeing some of those e-bike prices coming down for a little while, but now again in 2026, it looks like there may be some preliminary data suggesting we kind of hit the bottom for all channels, and now those average selling prices, due to tariffs or everything else, are increasing. But yeah, if we look at it from a quantity perspective, it is certainly not 30 some percent. It is significantly less than that because the e-bikes do tend to be so much more expensive.
This question is probably more speculative at this point, but it does relate to a lot of policy news that's been coming out over the last couple months regarding e-bike legislation, and specifically the legislation being kind of anti-e-bike, like what we saw coming out of New Jersey. Do you anticipate that that type of legislation is going to negatively impact the effective sales or the demand on e-bikes across the country?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for asking that one. It's certainly there's a little bit of any publicity is good publicity may not always apply, right? Certainly, folks who ride bikes and maybe weren't aware that some sort of piece of legislation like that could have passed in their state may suddenly see that and think, um, oh darn, I need to, go and help take action, and that can drum up some support for that sort of legislation to potentially change. But yes, we do suspect that there's going to be an effect based on how many states might enact certain, restrictions that make it harder for e-bikes to sell because it's all kind of a ripple effect, right? And it's so much of it will not necessarily be picked up in some of this data until a while goes on. We certainly know that like when COVID happened, a lot of retailers closed their doors, not necessarily because their business wasn't doing well, but because maybe they were kind of, a half step out of the door wanting to retire. And suddenly that happened and they thought, oh, okay. So it kind of just bumps up that timeline. And so there could be things like that where, oh, okay, I was looking to, move or do something with my business. And suddenly this new law makes me think, oh, I got to change my tack. So we'll be paying attention certainly to try to see if it has a big enough impact. But to kind of give a nod to my folks over on the other side of People for Bikes who are fighting all of that kind of all of that bad legislation, we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to combat that and get some fixes put through quickly.
Yep. I just want to add on to that, that we do have an entire vertical within People for Bikes who's focused on policy legislation work. So we are already in discussions with the new administration in New Jersey on what that might look like to amend that existing bill that's been enacted, and then also all the other states throughout the country who are considering e-bike regulations. People for Bikes has a seat at the table on your behalf, on the behalf of the industry, and we're actively working towards model legislation that's going to distinguish e-bikes from e-motos to allow us to prevent those situations from occurring across the country. So we're on the path, and we'll hopefully see some great outcomes in 2026 and beyond. All right, let's pivot back to the data suite. We have several questions that rolled in on the data suite, Connor. I'd love for you to answer a few of these live. The
Sure.
first question here is, does it make sense for nonprofits to take advantage of the data suite?
Yeah, absolutely. I obviously can't talk to exactly what nonprofit you are speaking from, but the data insights that we're being able to glean from this information, from the aggregated data that we already have, is fantastic. So whether you're some form of a co-op or just looking to get more cyclists out there, the information currently available, even in its current state of the data suite, is wildly useful for both bike shops and nonprofits, 100% there.
And Connor, would you say like this kind of feels like a question too that I feel like we get where maybe dealers who don't deal in the big four brands kind of think, oh, I'm a small shop. Is my data worth it? Do you even want it? Is that useful? And sort of that feels like a similar kind of response, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's really no fish too small that's useful in this. We want everyone to have representation in this data set. We're not looking to build a dashboard just for the big four. We want this to be a wholly representative sample set throughout the whole data set there. So we are not looking to have a strong bias towards the big four. We really want to open this up to the entire market.
Yeah, and really we want it to be as representative as the market is, right? So we want to make sure that we do have representation from nonprofits, from folks who don't carry the big four brands. We want to make sure that as we are estimating or projecting the market for specific subcategories where maybe in the past, if you're at a specific brand, you may have known like, yeah, that estimate is kind of far off. I might only be using that to kind of gauge directionality. We want to ensure like we're working with you to potentially, see, oh, okay, maybe we need to weight this a little differently, or we need to go after some more of these, whatever it might be, like niche electric cargo only, kind of like those sort of urban mobile, like more cargo shop. Like we want to make sure that we are representing everyone, so we're not losing those niches in the data we want. So yes, the answer is if you're a bike shop, if you sell bikes or sell bike parts, we want you aboard, please.
Or if you're only service focused, that is definitely a
Or if
part of
yes,
the data set that is currently in current samples out there, definitely lacking. And there are a lot of service focused shops that do very little in the way of actual new or custom bike sales. That is super, super useful data still. We still want you guys to have a seat at the table when it comes to accurately representing what is happening in the US bicycle market.
I think a question that builds on that, that's very similar. Do you guys plan on having similar data sharing for bike brands, OEMs?
yes, and so there's the current kind of product for that right now. Circana puts it together for us, and it was previously called the BPSA kind of sell in, and that is looking at bicycle brands who are selling their bikes into retailers and or what their inventory, their sort of wholesale warehouse inventory is. And so we plan to take over that and try to capture the entire market for that as well, with the hope also being that at some point in the future, down the road, that we're not just capturing bikes, but potentially we're capturing kind of the inventory for everything. So yeah, we want to be able to plug into and provide a as comprehensive of a view as possible, knowing that for right now we're focused on IBDs and their inventory and sales, and then also the brands who are already participating in that sell in data.
And Connor, there's a question here about privacy for the data suite. The
Mhm.
question is, in the data suite, can brands see my locations data?
So yeah, no. There will never be a backdoor for suppliers or the supplier dashboard to be able to see individual location, sales, or service data. We have built a completely separate dashboard for the supply side there that does not have the same insights as to what the retailer dashboard is allowing you guys to see there. So we really focused on making the cut between the supplier and the retailers as safe as it can be for retailers, where no one brand is ever going to be able to zoom in and see exactly what your one shop is doing. Whether that's another brand, a supplier of some sort, or even another shop. We don't want anyone to be able to go in and, see exactly what your sales numbers are, see exactly what your service numbers are, see your inventory levels look like. That is something that is a hard line for us there.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Connor.
and along those lines, just to kind of fill in too and round that out and talk kind of dream big picture, if we're talking 5 years down the road, maybe even more, we hope to have thousands of bike shops participating, and at that point, we may even be able to get down to like a region such as the state of pick your state. We certainly won't be able to show that until we have enough retailer representation in that state, such that showing it won't sort of tip someone's hat to the fact that it's one multi-store location providing the bulk of South Dakota's sales because we only have 10 shops currently signed up from South Dakota. Like we need to get representation before we do that, but yeah, that's the hope and the goal.
Going back to the first part of your presentation, Liam, and the slides that you were showing before the data suite demo, one question that came in is, are you able to speak to what disciplines or types of riding these newer occasional riders are participating in?
Yeah, that's one that I would kind of encourage if you are a member organization of People for Bikes that I would send you our physical activity council data because that it's going to show a little bit kind of it breaks out paved versus unpaved versus mountain versus indoor cycling versus BMX. And that sort of thing might be able to show some of that because it's got a similar core versus casual breakdown. But really, it's across the board where casuals aren't necessarily, we know they aren't racing and participating, in sort of a high level, but they are participating in um, the 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 disciplines you might think as far as and as far as like the bikes that you might think, it's a lot of those sorts of cruiser transit fitness type bikes, but then also sort of beginner gravel bikes as gravel is taking off. More people are breaking into that as well. If you didn't notice the on that one slide that I just brought back up a minute ago that showed road was one of the few that has actually kind of been increasing in market share, and that's because gravel is a subset of that. And so we've seen growth there that it has to be attributed to some casual riders who are getting into it and choosing to get into that. Maybe they live on the Dirty Kansas route and they saw him drive by and said, "Yeah, I want that."
Unbound.
Unbought, thank you. Ah,
Yeah.
jeez. I'm an old
The
man.
used
Old
data, the
habits.
used the used
Old
data
habits
that you
die hard.
showed, does that include IBD used bikes currently?
That does not, but with the caveat being, please join our bicycle industry data exchange and help us get that number because that is one thing that in the current data set is a bit lacking, and so we hope to be able to fill that void because we know there are a lot of shops who lean pretty heavily into whether it's a consignment or a trade up, those sorts of things, and so we know there is a large amount happening just based on the 200 retailer sample that we already have. So currently, the data that you saw today, no, it does not. But in the future, with our data suite, we will be showing data.
Can you provide more detail on what's considered rest of market in the market breakdown compared to direct to consumer, IBD, used bike?
Yes. So it is, I suppose one way to think about it is IBDs are specialty kind of independent shops and are typically just regional level chains where as soon as you get into big box stores like Walmart and Target and Dick's Sporting Goods, Amazon, that is the rest of market. That is the kind of beyond. And so those are really the big shops that are included, or the big stores that are included in that data set. It includes REI as well and Shields. So you kind of get a little into more into that sort of specialty big box. Um, and yeah, it's sort of everything that isn't direct to consumer or uh, independent bike dealers.
Thanks, Liam. The last question that's currently in the Q&A, and we do have a few minutes left, so if you still have questions that are lingering, feel free to drop them in there. It doesn't really apply to the scope of this webinar, but I did message our policy team and got an answer for this question, which is, what is the current status of the CPSC deciding on UL 2894 versus EN 15194 certification for the industry? And that's an e-bike battery ruling. And this is what the policy team responded. The CPSC is unlikely to decide on any mandatory federal battery safety rules in the next few years. So that's where that stands. But if you do have follow-up questions about the CPSC and where they stand on the e-bike battery regulations, feel free to email me directly and I can put you in touch with our policy folks. My email is just Ryan, Ryan, at peopleforbikes.org. Feel free to send those questions to me. So that wraps up all of our current Q&A in the chat. Um, Liam, Connor, I really appreciate you guys coming on to answer people's questions and then also to provide insights into what the data suite is shaping up to be and how we need everyone's support to make it the best product it can be. I think it's something that we're really excited about and seen a lot of momentum for already. Can't wait to see what happens over the next couple months as we kind of gear up for traditional warm weather season. So looking forward to seeing what that
For
looks
sure.
like. But thank you both for your time. And with no other
Thank you.
Q&As, I think we're ready to go.
Awesome. Thank you all. And if since we didn't see you at this Frostbike, we'll see you at the next one. Appreciate you all coming on and sitting with us.
Take care, everyone.